If you were anywhere near Washington, D.C. on the afternoon of June 4th, 2023, you heard it. A boom loud enough to rattle windows, loud enough to send people running outside, loud enough that, for a few minutes, half the city assumed the worst. Was this a hijacking? A malfunction? An attack aimed at the Capitol itself? They were wrong about what it was. Somewhere above them, 6 fighter jets were chasing a private plane that had just flown through some of the country's most heavily guarded airspace, without making a single radio call. This is the real story of the ghost flight over Washington. Welcome to Tragic Flights. Every tragedy has a story, every disaster has a cause, and every flight leaves lessons behind. If you never want to miss the stories behind these events, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future episodes of Tragic Flights. Let's begin. Nothing about June 4th, 2023 looked like the start of a national mystery. The aircraft was a Cessna 560 Citation 5, tail number N611VG, a twin-engine business jet built to seat up to 11 passengers in the kind of comfort that costs several $1 million. That Sunday, it was carrying 4. The jet belonged to Encore Motors of Melbourne, a Florida company owned by John and Barbara Rumpel, who'd bought this particular Citation only 2 months earlier. John flew planes himself. Barbara ran the business side. In the left seat, Jeff Hefner, 69, 4 decades in aviation, starting out as a crop duster, years flying for Southwest Airlines, and more recently working as the Rumpel's personal pilot and aircraft mechanic. He held a first-class medical certificate and roughly 34,500 flight hours, the kind of resume other pilots respect on sight. Behind him sat Adina Azarian, 49, a real estate broker from East Hampton on Long Island, and her 2-year-old daughter, Aria. And also on the flight was Evadne Smith, 56, the nanny the family called Nanny V, close enough to Adina and Aria that the 3 of them were more like family. The 3 of them had just spent 4 days visiting the Rumpels at their home in North Carolina. John Rumpel was Adina's adoptive father and the owner of the Cessna Citation. Barbara Rumpel was Adina's adoptive mother. Now they were flying back to Long Island the way they always did. Climb aboard, buckle in, be home in time for dinner. Nobody photographs the boring middle of a flight plan. That's exactly what this was supposed to be. At 1:13 p.m., the Citation lifted off from Elizabethton Municipal Airport in Tennessee, climbing out over green Appalachian ridgelines toward Long Island MacArthur Airport. Weather was clear, the flight plan simple and already approved. Shortly after takeoff, Hefner checked in with Atlanta Air Traffic Control, reporting he was climbing through 9,300 feet. Routine, normal. Nothing in his voice suggested anything was wrong. Then, somewhere in the next several minutes, something changed. At 1:28 p.m., 15 minutes after wheels up, a controller radioed new instructions. Stop the climb. There's traffic above you. Silence. They tried again. Nothing. The Citation kept climbing anyway, straight through the assigned ceiling, leveling off on its own at 34,000 feet, exactly where it would stay, untouched, for the next 2 hours. Whatever was happening inside that cockpit, it wasn't stopping the autopilot from doing its job. That single detail would end up mattering more than almost anything else in this story. For the next hour, controllers up and down the East Coast tried everything available to them. They called the assigned frequency again and again. Every attempt got the same answer, nothing back. And yet the airplane kept flying a textbook flight plan. Correct heading, correct altitude, every waypoint arriving right on schedule, like a student pilot who'd done everything right except talk to anyone. That combination should have been reassuring. It was the opposite. A jet in real trouble, fire, engine failure, a hijacking, rarely flies this cleanly. This one was too calm, too precise. Controllers now had an airplane, fully under control in every mechanical sense, that had simply stopped acknowledging anyone else existed. At 2:33 p.m., the Citation reached the airspace around Long Island MacArthur, its own filed destination, still cruising at 34,000 feet. It lined up on the runway heading. Then it kept going. There was no descent, no radio call, no attempt to land. It sailed directly over the airport it was supposedly flying to, out over open water, on the exact same heading, as if it had never actually intended to stop there. Then, without warning, it banked and began a long, slow arc back the way it came, over Long Island Sound, over New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, heading straight for one of the most heavily defended pieces of sky in the entire country. Washington, D.C. doesn't just protect its airspace, it arms it. That's been true since the days after September 11th, when a no-fly corps first went up over the city. That corps is still there today, if you noticed, a tightly locked-down, flight-restricted zone inside about 15 miles of the capital, wrapped inside a wider 30 nautical mile special flight. Rules area added a couple of years later. Show up uninvited without talking to anyone, and the response is fighter jets. Around 3 p.m., DC emergency officials were told a silent, unresponsive aircraft was heading directly into that ring. 6 F-16s scrambled in pairs from 3 different bases, the first pair launching out of Joint Base Andrews, where President Biden happened to be golfing that very afternoon. To catch a jet already cruising at 34,000 feet, those F-16s had no real choice but to go supersonic over one of the most densely populated regions in the country. Around 3:15, a boom rolled across Washington, Maryland, and Virginia, rattling windows anywhere from Maryland's eastern shore to the Virginia suburbs, dozens of miles apart. Within minutes, 911 lines across the region lit up, and social media filled with the same question over and over. Did anyone else just feel that? The Capitol complex was quietly placed on elevated alert. Almost nobody outside a small circle of officials knew why yet. It wasn't a bomb. It wasn't an attack. It was 2 fighter jets breaking the sound barrier to reach a plane whose pilot, as far as anyone could tell, had simply stopped answering. At 3:20 p.m., roughly 20 miles northeast of Reagan National, the F-16s finally pulled alongside the Citation. They fired flares, a last resort meant to catch a pilot's eye when radio calls fail. NORAD later confirmed the flares posed no danger to anyone on the ground. They were simply a last attempt to get one man's attention. Nothing. So the fighter pilots closed the distance and looked through the windows themselves. What they didn't see mattered as much as what they did. There was no smoke in the cabin, no broken windows, no torn fuselage, nothing to suggest fire, explosion, or violence of any kind. Whatever had happened to this airplane, it hadn't been attacked, and it hadn't come apart. What they did see was quieter and worse. One figure, slumped forward in the pilot's seat, motionless. Nobody else in view was moving either. There's a particular kind of helplessness reserved for a fighter pilot who's done everything right, found the target, closed the distance, followed every step of the protocol, only to realize there's genuinely nothing left to do. You can't land another man's airplane by flying next to it. You can't open a hatch on a jet screaming along at 34,000 feet. For 2 full minutes, they simply stayed with it, watching an aircraft they now understood with total certainty wasn't a threat to anyone while having no way at all to help the people still inside it. 2 minutes after the Intercept at 3:22 p.m., the Citation's flight path changed for the first time in nearly 2 hours. It rolled right, and it didn't stop rolling. A calm, level cruise turned into a tightening, descending spiral. The flight path of an aircraft with nobody left at the controls to correct it. Radar showed a descent rate that, at one point, passed 30,000 feet a minute. At that speed, 34,000 feet of altitude doesn't take long to disappear. The F-16 pilots could only follow from a distance and watch a plane fall out of the sky right in front of them. At 3:23 p.m., the Citation struck the north face of Mine Bank Mountain, inside the George Washington National Forest's St. Mary's Wilderness, terrain so remote that rescue crews needed most of 4 hours just to reach it on foot. There were no survivors. One part of this story was now finished. The other part, the why, was only just beginning. The National Transportation Safety Board would spend nearly 2 years chasing that question, and even then, wouldn't answer all of it. Investigators expected to need 3 to 4 days just to process the site. Lead investigator Adam Gerhardt described wreckage so fragmented, it barely looked like a plane at all. What remained was eventually moved to a secure facility in Delaware for reconstruction. No flight data recorder was required or found. A cockpit voice recorder was supposedly on board, according to maintenance paperwork from weeks earlier, but it was never located in the debris. Whatever Hefner said, or didn't say, in his final conscious minutes is gone for good. What investigators could reconstruct came largely from maintenance records, and those records were troubling. 5 inspection items were overdue on the Citation the day it crashed, including a check of the co-pilot's oxygen mask. About 4 weeks earlier, a maintenance visit had turned up 26 separate discrepancies, several of them tied directly to the pressurization and environmental control system. The owner was told and chose not to address them. Then, 2 days before the flight, a mechanic servicing an unrelated issue noticed something else. The pilot side oxygen mask wasn't even installed, and the aircraft's single emergency oxygen bottle, meant to supply both crew and cabin, was sitting at its bare minimum. One mask housing was found sealed with an ordinary dust cap instead of the proper part. Investigators found no mechanical failure that would account for the cabin losing pressure in the first place. Yes, there was no cracked seal, not even a failed door. On paper, the system should have worked. Something still thinned the air inside that cockpit until the people breathing it could no longer think straight, and nobody can say exactly what or when. At the altitude this jet was climbing to, losing cabin pressure could leave a healthy adult with as little as 30 seconds of clear thinking before hypoxia took over. And if the pressure dropped slowly enough that no one noticed, they might never know they were in danger. Just a quiet fog settling over everyone on board, one thought at a time, until there was no one left awake to reach for an oxygen mask. If those masks would have worked at all. There's one more wrinkle worth knowing because it's so interesting. Hefner's file showed high blood pressure and high cholesterol, plus a prior prescription for a weight loss stimulant that federal aviation rules say pilots should never fly on, along with an occasional painkiller for a long-standing back problem. No autopsy or toxicology test was ever performed. But investigators found no evidence he'd used anything inappropriately, or that he was carrying any unusual personal risk. More to the point, a personal medical event in the pilot doesn't explain why the 3 people behind him never moved either. Whatever this was, it took all 4 of them together. That's what pointed investigators towards something in the air everyone was breathing, not something only Hefner was dealing with. Released in May 2025, the final report put it plainly: pilot incapacitation from a loss of cabin pressure. For reasons investigators could never pin down, behind the tragedy was a simple but critical decision. The pilot and the aircraft owner chose to fly that day, even though the aircraft's emergency oxygen system wasn't working. Behind the case number and the registration plate were 4 people who'd simply wanted to get home. Adina Azarian had spent 2 decades building a real estate career in Manhattan before moving out to the Hamptons, where colleagues remembered her as warm, driven, and completely devoted to her daughter. The Rumpels had adopted her as an adult, 7 years before Aria was born, after losing their biological daughter, Victoria, in a scuba diving accident nearly 30 years earlier. By their own account, they'd simply grown too close to Adina to let her stay anything less than family. It's a detail that turns this crash into something crueler than ordinary bad luck. A couple who'd already buried one daughter, now burying a second. 2-year-old Aria never got the chance to become anything but somebody's whole world. Evadne Smith, Nanny V to the family who loved her, had cared for Aria through most of her short life and traveled everywhere with them, closer to family than staff. She left behind a son back home in Jamaica. Jeff Hefner left behind a wife and 3 children, and more than 40 years in aviation. The kind of career other pilots point to with respect, until the one day it ended all 4 lives at once. Inside the aviation world, this crash is a blunt reminder of something every pressurized aircraft pilot is supposed to know: cold. The oxygen system is not a formality. It is the only thing standing between a normal flight and a cabin full of people who quietly stop thinking clearly, one by one, with no idea it's happening. 4 people climbed aboard that Sunday, expecting nothing more than an ordinary flight home. None of them ever got the chance to notice anything was wrong. Every jet, however expensive, is only as safe as its most recently ignored maintenance item. And every safety system ever built only works if somebody actually switches it on. Rest in peace to Jeff Hefner, Adina Azarian, Aria Azarian, and Evadne Smith. If this story moved you, make sure to share it, leave a like, and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of Tragic Flights.